Thanks for saying the Citizen Extra continues. Let's just bring you live pictures now from Uhuru Park, where nurses continue with their strike and are holding a meeting there this morning. These pictures are live. Remember, their strike well past the 100th day mark, still insisting that government SRC rescinds its position and gives them their minimums before they return to work. This is a strike that has seen various technical cadres of staff in the medical sector join in with nurses. Seth Panyako there present, and very shortly we'll bring you more from Uhuru Park. Those are live pictures for you this morning. But in studio, we continue in the final minutes of the show to look ahead to the meeting that is well underway between IEBC and the representatives of political parties, Chris Wamalwa, Kiminini legislator, and of course from NASA. Let me start with you. We get into the final minutes of the show talking about the art of negotiation, or will it just be a boardroom war? Going into these talks, NASA went in with the irreducible minimums, which you had begun to expound on. Can you, at a negotiating table, still go in with a, quote, irreducible minimum, a hardline position, or from now on, must these be suggestions that are open for negotiation? Good.
I think when you look at the principles of negotiations, first, you must be open-minded. You go there with an open mind. Two, it must be a win-win. It should not be a win-lose. Those are the critical principles when it comes to the art of negotiation. And lastly, a good negotiator, you must have your irreducible minimums. It's very critical that as you go to negotiate, you have these are your irreducible minimums, this team is reducible minimums ABCD. So in terms of negotiations, if we had maybe someone leading those talks, first they look at the irreducible minimums from all parties. Now you compare what are the reducible minimums from the NASA side, from the Jubilee side, and maybe from the IEBC side. You might be surprised that the reducible minimums you're talking about, they cut across when maybe it comes to the Jubilee side and maybe when it comes to the IEBC side. So it's very, very critical that the reducible minimums must be there. Now you look at the issue of practicability. There must be some reducible minimums, maybe they are not practical based on the time frame that is remaining, because really the ruling of the Supreme Court was 60 days, now we have about 28 days. For instance, if it's the issue of technology, and if at all it's only Safaricom that is there, so you look at the practicability, and from that negotiating point of view, then some people can be able to say, hey, we need to relax on this issue because it is not practical. Again, when the type of people you send in negotiations, you know, you must look at the characters that these people have. We didn't want to take someone who is going to be there to worsen the situation. I don't want to say anything about the Jubilee side, maybe Duale or whatever. I don't want to comment. But if you look at the representation from the NASA side, I think when you look at the characters of those gentlemen who are there, even the tone of speaking, you know, I can tell you we've sent our best, and I have no doubt that they are going to come out with something. So the issue is this, and I want to quote Martin Luther King Jr. He said something very interesting that I like, that, and this applies to Jubilee and another side, that we must learn to live together as brothers, or we perish together as fools. We have no any other country. This is the country that we need. And that's why I started by saluting IEBC for calling for this kind of dialogue, which was actually long overdue. So they'll be able to look at the reducible minimums vis-a-vis the ruling of the Supreme Court. The issues of irregularities and illegalities, they'll go further and see where was this. For instance, if we had forms which were printed which never had the security features, that must be fixed. If they are not serialized, that must be fixed. When you look at your IDN, it has a serial number. That serial number was to ensure issues of accountability so that anything cannot come in. We know very well that if the process is fraudulent, the output obviously is also fraudulent. So those loopholes must be sealed. Secondly, When you look at those things of the Kim's kit, and look at the Safran Morphin, the French company. I remember during elections, we were having the results coming on TV. And even the judge asked, what were those ones? And Lawyer Nyamodi for IEBC said, those were not the results. Those were the data or the statistics. You know, that means we had a problem somewhere. So unless we get the right supplier of that technology, we don't want to go back to the same problem, whereby we are told elections, people started voting a day to the voting time, and even after the results were declared, and you go back, you'll see voting was still going on those IT whatever stuff. So this is critical for these guys, Safran Morphin. If they cannot measure to the expectations, really, we should not have them to supply the Kim's kit or the IT staff. When it comes to Aligrea, when you look at the printing of the 34S, it was a big mess. So unless IEBC is going to come up with measures, we've seen the issue of UNDP coming in. Whom did they consult? Should they have not consulted the Jubilee side, another side, to come on the round table, so that a clear framework is being outlined on how these people are going to be engaged? Remember, Kenya is a sovereign state, and it's also very dangerous, because Article 88 of the Constitution is very clear who is responsible for the supervision, monitoring, declaration of the results. When you bring in the element of UNDP, it brings a legal challenge. So the issue is, as they come together, let them discuss and put the minimum, irreducible minimums. I wish to see the 40 irreducible minimums from the IEBC side. Let's also look at the irreducible minimums from the Jubilee side. I'm sure Jubilee will also be happy to see that these elections are going to be free, fair, and credible. So this team of negotiation is a very critical team that we must pay attention. And it would have been nice to have the church leaders at a later stage, if need be, for them to come in and help the process to be finalized amicably.
All right, let's get then from Jubilee, their position in terms of your art of negotiation. One, Chris talking about the team being key, not people who will take hardline positions. And two, what for them are bare minimums. Do you have that as Jubilee? Have you agreed on bare minimums?
Well, there's something that I need to correct right from the onset. I even saw that position being taken by Francis Gashuri when he was giving us an update of what is happening at Bomas. There's this thinking that for every position that NASA has, Jubilee takes the opposite. I think nothing could be further from the truth. We don't have a position on Algoria. We don't have a position on OT Mofo. This is purely a dispute between NASA and IEBC. As Jubilee, the reason we're there is because we are an interested party, and should there be any decision to the contrary of what is there presently, we'd want to be informed why that decision was reached to and how it affects us as a coalition. We do not have such demands as NASA are placing. It will be unfair because, Chris, I gave you your time. You see, that is a grave mistake, because every time we speak and we appear to be defending IEBC, that is a point that NASA keeps on coming in and saying IEBC and Jubilee are in bed. And that is a wrong assumption. As Jubilee, we are level-headed and very clear about this. All we want is a free, fair, credible, accurate, verifiable, election. If NASA can place their demands, these things that they are calling the irreducible minimums, if it were up to me, and if NASA were genuinely sincere and have the good interest of this country at heart, what they would be raising to IEBC are the fears that they have, that this is what we fear may happen. Please give us your assurance that this is what are the measures that you're putting in place to ensure that these kind of things do not happen.
Point of order.
And whether they will be given, when they are given, they would come back and say, okay, we are satisfied in terms of this. For example, a very simple thing. One of the reasons I had one of their councils say the reason they are opposed to Algoria is because of the up to now they have not been explained to where the 1.2 million extra ballot papers went. I'm sure if you went to IEBC and demanded to see them, you'd be able to see them. And there's no confirmation. Even the case that you took to the Supreme Court, there is no point of contestation of saying that there was stuffing of ballot papers. So to me, NASA are not genuine when they are going to this talk. The kind of letters and the things that they keep on saying in press conferences, where they keep on telling us there will be no elections with so much certainty on the 26th.
But surely you can concede that Chris has taken a softer stance this morning.
I agree, and give it to him.
Let me explain something.
But unfortunately, Chris is not among the people. I wish they had sent him, because to me, he's more level-headed than some of the people that have been sent there.
With due respect, when you go for any negotiations, normally, you must be able to outline what are the critical issues. And in this case, the critical issues, you arrive at them based on the Supreme Court ruling.
That's true.
So whatever issues we came up with, they were derived from that ruling. And if you don't know, I'll be able to bring them. Let me finish.
Okay.
So there's no way Jubilee you can go there and say that the stand is between NASA and IEBC.
Yes.
The critical issues here, look. One, there were votes which were coming in from unregistered polling centers. So that is one of the critical issues that has to be discussed. Secondly, the issue of Form 34As. If some Form 34As, some lack security features, others maybe lack the serial numbers, that's a critical issue that must be raised. And it's not NASA come bring it from the moon. You derive that from what has been ruled from the court. So the issue is this: as Jubilee, when you go there, if you have identified the critical issues which led to irregularities and illegalities, you must have a stand on those issues. Absolutely.
That is the point that I've been raising all along. That in most actually up to 90% of the disputes that are before that boardroom today, Jubilee is not party to. These are things that NASA have raised on themselves based on this. For example, when they raise about personnel, yet you're saying all your irreducible minimums are derived from the ruling of the Supreme Court. Yet one of your irreducible minimum is that certain personnel are supposed to be fired. Yet the ruling by Chief Justice Baraga was very clear that no individual is found to be culpable. So how is it? How do the two correlate?
Yes, and based on that, Chris, if you would, let me come to Daisy and to you, Brian, now, because you clearly can see it is a situation where emotions are high and everybody has their position. How do you actually start to negotiate when, you know, the tone, the rhetoric has been so fever pitch?
Well, you know, for me, I hope that each team, I imagine that each team has directions from their respective principals with their own set of irreducible minimums, and that this is not an opportunity for grandstanding, but one to resolve, because each one knows what the position of the other is. And so I hope that by the time they are going into these talks, the Jubilee team, knowing what NASA's irreducible minimums are, and with the position of seeking a middle ground to be able to move this issue forward, they have their set of what they are willing to concede and what they are not willing to concede, and likewise the NASA side. On the other hand, IEBC, as an independent body, have the responsibility of abiding by the Supreme Court decision, while at the same time listening to the concerns of the stakeholders. But by and large, the irreducible minimum is the threshold that has been set by the Constitution. And that must be the premise upon which IEBC is basing their interventions. That even as the Supreme Court has identified these issues, this is what we are doing in terms of resolving them. And there must be some good faith measures that IEBC is willing to concede so as to appease either side of the political divide, while also assuring Kenyans and the voters at large that they are committed to ensuring that the constitutional threshold as set of accurate, accountable, verifiable, transparent and free process is going to be met. Failure to that, then I think we have a problem with the political class. If this is going to be an avenue for grandstanding where people are coming in to win brownie points and not to resolve the issue with the aim of moving this country forward to having an election, we are going to be facing a very difficult time. And that will be seen shortly, because they are now there, they are talking. These are the people who are basically holding back the process, you know, making it very difficult for IEBC to move on. But the buck ultimately stops with Chairman Chebukati. He will have to make a decision one way or the other, regardless of what the political class does, because ultimately, if this thing goes wrong, the blame squarely lies with him.
On him. All right, we'll be watching him. Brian, you have the last word.
For me, of course, in a meeting like this, everybody comes with their demands, and there's nothing wrong with that. The threshold, other than the Constitution, because the Constitution is very clear, the laid guidelines are very clear, the threshold for these negotiations should actually be the Supreme Court ruling. And the Supreme Court ruling is very simple. It has clearly stipulated what happened. Even though they are not saying so and so is culpable. And I've said this and I'll say it again. The matter before Supreme Court was not to determine culpability, criminal or otherwise. That was not their role. Their role was to check whether the Constitution was held, the elections were held within the Constitution, and provided laws, rules and regulations. Now for me, these are the key things that IEBC should do. They need to decipher issues from the Supreme Court ruling. Number one, issues of printing of ballot papers. I've heard individuals and politicians saying, we don't care whether you do it in River Road. Now it has come out clearly that where you print ballot papers and election materials is extremely important. The key things that came out of the Supreme Court ruling, number one, was there a security feature in the Form 34As from Arguraya. Others were arguing not all of them had security features. Others are arguing the others that were printed in River Road. So the issue of the printer is a serious issue. So we need to decide whether we are going back to Alguraya or not. Number two, the issue of
serialized.
Of course, those are election materials. Number two, there are individuals that have been mentioned very clearly if you read the Supreme Court ruling. And they have said those individuals attempted to misguide the Supreme Court. And it's very clear. Chiloba is one of them. Immaculate Kasait is another. James Muhati is another one. Then why again insist in having those people to be part of the electoral process? And I think that should actually form the basis on which discussions should be had and outcomes of these negotiations. And
I thank you all for your views throughout the last 3 hours. Chris Wamalo, who's the community legislator, Aaron Cheriot, Kericho County Senator, Daisy Amdan, women rights advocate, Brian Weke, governance expert, and earlier Bishop Cornelius Korir, who was with us of the Eldoret Diocese. We're taking a break. Brian Okoth is up next. He's got your social media update.